welcome you to today's March Lobby Days special online climate advocate training. Before we get started, we just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that each of you are taking time away from your family, your friends, your hobbies, especially on a Sunday afternoon, to tune in and join us for this training and to work on something that's obviously so much larger than any of us individually. And for that, we're incredibly grateful. And we also want to give a quick shout out to any of our attendees that are calling in from around the world outside of the US. I know in the chat, we've seen a couple of those already that are doing critical work building political will for carbon pricing support outside of the US. Today's model is specifically going to focus on the US since we're specifically gearing up for March Lobby Days, but you can apply a lot of what we're talking about to your country as well. And a big shout out especially to all of our Canadians for actually implementing and making policy reality in your country and giving the US a North Star to really guide us in our policy advocacy for as well. And let's find out a little bit more about our presenters. So my name is Brett Cease. I'm out of Duluth, Minnesota here. I've been involved in volunteering with CCL for about a decade and am now CCL's Education and Engagement Director, and have absolutely found the work that CCL is doing to build connections, especially with members of Congress or members of our communities across the political aisle, something that I continue to return to and find really essential right now within the climate movement.
Thank you, Brett. So my name is Solemi Hernandez. I have the honor to be your Southeast Regional Coordinator. Our area includes Florida, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. I have been a community's grassroots activist for many years with a passion for climate solutions. I'm a part-time political science student. I am the mother of 2 awesome boys, which are my reason of all the things I do in this job. And with that, I pass it back to you, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you, Solemi. My name is Olivia Deeker. I'm a recent graduate from the Ohio State University, and I study landscape architecture. And I'm just recently getting into climate advocacy as well. And I'm looking for ways to use design to help solve the climate crisis. So I've been working as the education engagement intern, and today I'm tech support for the Zoom call. I'm happy to be here. See you guys all here too.
Well, thank you, Olivia, for playing tech support, and we're so honored for all of us to be able to join. One last thing for those that are just tuning in before I kick it over to you, Solemi, and that is today's slides are provided in the chat there. You're welcome to save those for later. You don't have to take too ambitious of notes because they're all written out there for you. And we're going to be on this call till 5 Eastern. So it's a 2.5-hour workshop special. We'll have some breaks built in. And if you need to drop off, no worries. We understand you have busy lives.
So Brett, let's use the chat to find out more about our attendees today too. Put in the chat in the bottom of your screen, where do you live and what are you most committed to in life and why? We got Nate at Rural Carbon, and we're getting a lot. They're Evanson. Oh my God, they're popping up so quick.
Scandinavia, Wisconsin, most committed to a conservative approach to carbon fee and dividend because of our grandchildren's future. Welcome, Trey. Thank you for being here.
I'm most committed to serve the world because it fits future generations. That's so beautiful. I want to end with that one.
I love it. We'll keep them coming. We are all here together. We know that we're constrained by our technology, but we're so glad that we're connected. And we'll jump in to talking about what we'll actually focus on today and our 3 learning goals and our time together with our 5 main areas of focus. So we want to ground you with our values, our organization and structure so that you feel more comfortable and conversant about CCL when you leave. We're going to give you some specific examples, some case studies of our methodology on the ground and how citizens throughout this country are generating political will for a livable world. We actually also know that many of you are here to get ready for your March Lobby Days with your local teams. So we have an ambitious plan to put you in breakout rooms for the final hour and actually practice a mock lobby meeting, and we'll walk through getting you ready before then. And we also want to make sure to talk about and cover and have time for questions on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, a key element towards addressing the challenges that we face with climate change that meets the scale of the climate challenge we face in the time frame that we need it to. But with that overview, let's jump in and get started. And I'll kick it back over to Solemi to actually share a bit more about our 7 core values that ground all of our staff and volunteers.
Thank you, Brett. So we often talk about the CCL way of doing things, But what are Citizens Climate Lobby values? As Citizens Climate Lobby is growing so quickly, it's key that all of our thousands of supporters are on the same page. Our values are something we use to guide our decisions, how we respond to others. It's like a home base we know we can return to. CCL recognized 7 core values that are essential to our identity: integrity, focus, optimism, relationship, personal power, being nonpartisan, and diversity. So let's explore each of these briefly.
All right, we'll jump right in with focus. Yeah, thank you, Solemi. Our focus is the first step towards impactful climate solutions, placing a national fee on carbon dioxide emissions. We know it's not going to solve the problem entirely, and we appreciate the work that our friends and other groups are also doing in parallel to our focus. To be effective, we don't let ourselves get distracted by work that doesn't support that core purpose.
Next is my favorite, and it's what keeps me going. We believe that people is optimism. We believe that people are good and that democracy works. We are confident that our approach will work because we see progress. We stand for a solution, not in protest of other solutions. We are a community that offers one another comfort, support, and fun as we work.
We take the most generous approach to people that we see as good, and that democracy works as well, as Solemi highlighted. That grounded in appreciation, gratitude, and respect. We listen, we work to find common values, and we endeavor to understand our own biases, because we all got them. We know that there's a place for protest, but our approach is in building consensus.
Next, we got integrity. We are prepared and do our research. We're always on time for our meetings. Our approach is thoughtful and true. We consult experts and use data. We're open to new information. In fact, we solicit opposing opinions.
And I've got to say, as we continue to go through these, it is so inspirational to see everyone sharing what they're committed to and why they're involved. Keep that coming, especially for those that are just tuning in. But our next value is grounded in personal power. And this one's my favorite. We use our voices to be heard. And this simple act transforms each of us from spectators on the sideline to engaged citizens in the democratic process. It reveals the true nature of democracy to each of us. And as a volunteer-driven organization, we trust you as CCL volunteers and leaders to make important decisions and create and develop things that will be valued by all of our network.
Next, we have diversity. We empower everyone in exercising their personal and political power, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, ability, or political affiliation. We seek out support and elevate those people whose voices may not have been fully heard. We are also nonpartisan. We are open to all of those who are serious about solving climate change. You are welcome, no matter where you live, what you wear, what you do for a living, or who you voted in the last election. We work with elected officials and community leaders from across the political spectrum. We believe everyone is a potential ally. Now that we have reviewed our 7 core values, Brett is going to tell us all about CCL structure and regions within the US.
All right, let's jump right in. And this is especially for those that might just be getting started with CCL. So you've already heard us use this term volunteer driven, and we essentially are volunteer driven by being organized locally on the chapter level. And you also might hear us use the term chapter or group. We really mean them interchangeably as the same thing. A group or chapter is a local team that's dedicated to creating political will and clear evidence that citizens support action on climate change within a congressional district or a larger state or region. Now, CCL has literally hundreds of groups across North America and the larger world, from cities like New York to LA to Toronto to Pocatello, Idaho, or Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And what binds them together is that they each have a group leader or a couple of co-leads who help organize and coordinate the local activities of that group. Now, groups can be in varying stages of development. Some may just be getting up and running where you're at. You also might be next to a group or a chapter that's been around for over a decade and now has literally 50, 60, 70 members meeting monthly on Zoom. One of the key things that our online climate advocate training reviews each month is how to connect you with your local chapter if you haven't already hooked up. So let's go to the next slide and highlight how you can find your own local group. Each of our chapters in the US belongs within one of 11 different regions featured here on the map. And each region has a regional coordinator, the most important people in CCL that I think are doing that work of stitching together the local chapters and supporting their volunteers with our larger national focus. So we'll put a link where you can find more information about your regional coordinators in the chat. And the key thing that they're doing is basically helping you interface with your group leader. So if you haven't yet connected with your group leader, that's one of the big things that we want to take away after today for this goal. I'm guessing many of you have, as you've shared in the chat earlier on, that you're already plugged in. But for whatever reason, if you've reached out to your group leader or your chapter and you haven't heard back, we all know right now we're facing a barrage of emails. Sometimes they go to spam. Sometimes you get 100 in a day and it's hard to keep up. So please feel free to reach out to Solemi and I, and we'd love to be able to help connect you with your local group and make that introduction. Now that we've discussed our group leaders and the importance of organizing on the chapter level, I'll kick it back to you, Solemi, and we'll highlight another important role, that of the congressional liaison.
Thank you, Brad. One other role we should mention here is that of the congressional liaison. A CCL liaison is someone who represents for CCL when the group contacts a congressional staffer. Since there are 535 members of Congress, CCL goal is to have a personal liaison for each of those offices and their staff. The liaison builds ongoing relationship with their members of Congress and their staff by maintaining regular personal contact and by coordinating the group meetings and communication with that office. This can be anything from sending a card when your member experiences a significant event, updating the office with timely resources related to climate change, or even inviting the staff to a local barbecue. We are working on a complex issue, climate change. So having one constant point of contact with the office of each member of Congress make our process of communicating about climate change and our solution more effective. The liaison is the representative for CCL chapter, and the liaison has the goal of moving the member of Congress towards supporting the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Here's an important point of clarification. Even though we have liaisons, each CCL member is encouraged to personally write and call the members of Congress and do so frequently. And with that, I pass it back to you, Brad.
Yeah, one last thing I'll highlight just on liaison work, and that is with all of us in our meetings with Congress, is the important role of confidentiality. We take the role of confidentiality seriously because it's essential we don't repeat outside or share notes, emails, discussions, whatever it might be, what we hear in meetings. We leave it to the member of Congress, even if they're vocally enthusiastic, to make any public statement about climate. And the bottom line behind that is that whether it's a seemingly casual conversation, about policy details or any other private comments that we've heard, it's just critical that we train ourselves to respect what's said in confidence, because when we've consistently demonstrated we can be trusted in this way, it's really helped to open the door for deeper conversations that have moved our members forward. And with that, I'll kick it back over to you, Solemi.
Thank you, Brett. Connect to build those relationships of trust. Let's explore the CCL concept of looking for common ground, because finding common ground is the key to any long-term relationship, and long-term relationships are what CCL is all about. Building a long-term relationship with members of Congress and their staff are critical for our success. Here's the good news. We're absolutely convinced that we can find some common ground with anyone. When we look for common ground, we start in three places. We look for shared values, we look for social connections, and then we look at places we love and care about. Regarding shared values, it can start on the most simple level. If you have kids, consider that most members of Congress have kids and are concerned for their future as well. So during meetings, introductions, mention your kids or your grandkids. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Brad.
Yeah, Solemi, thank you. I'll just build on what you're sharing too on shared values. And that is, any of these ways that we have common overlap with our community are key to emphasize in your interactions with staff or members of Congress. Anything from freedom of choice, the importance of energy independence, an outlook for a safe and prosperous future, like you've highlighted, Solemi, even one's faith background or community involvements. The key thing is when you have identified those areas of overlap with your member of Congress or their staff to frame looking out at the same challenge together rather than seeing each other at loggerheads on the issue. So how can you ground that common overlap and then identify a common goal from it? As one example, after years of building a relationship with their own GOP member in Texas, here's what that member told a group of CCL volunteers about the common ground that he realized that they had found. We all agree, he said, that efforts to reduce emissions should work hand in hand with economic well-being. And he also had confidence, as well as the group, that the US should continue to lead in emission reductions by seeking cleaner air through American technology, innovation, and ingenuity without sacrificing affordable energy or middle-class jobs. It's a great framework from which to operate. Each of you with your own relationships is going to be able to build on and scaffold with those shared values. So Solemi also mentioned social connections. And what we mean by that is we take the time to find out about the people we meet with in advance seriously. For members of Congress, we can find out anything about former jobs, boards they serve on, schools they attended, interests they have outside of lawmaking. You can do the same thing with aides, especially right now in the LinkedIn era. Everything is online. You can find out a lot of this information easily. And CCL actually gets you started with your team by providing you a groundwork biography of your member of Congress with a lot of their background and key areas of interest. So if you haven't found that, we'll put a link to that in the chat in just a little bit here too to help you get started. And the key thing is when you find out about those connections, we don't just want to highlight them, as something to name drop. We actually want to leverage them to bring in those people or trusted messengers that they have that we may also have a connection to in our next meeting. Trusted messengers open the door. So if there's a hometown or a college connection that can also speak out on the importance of taking climate action with a specific policy prescription like the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, all the more powerful to bring in that connection with us, and research helps us prepare and find those people. Now, as Solemi also mentioned, lastly, common ground can literally be just that, a patch of ground on this earth, our turf, a place that we love or that we know the member of Congress or the staffer cherishes. We know that no matter who we talk to, people care for their home community and this larger world passionately. So in just a moment, we're going to start with our first activity today in breakouts to get us thinking about our own stories and using them as a basis for common ground. But before we do that, I'd love to just quickly acknowledge this as well. And on the next slide, what we have is a link to a statement that our executive director made after the Capitol insurrection earlier this year. It's something that still is on a lot of people's minds, and we'd love to just be able to highlight that and mention that it's key that if your member of Congress is among somebody that you felt wasn't honoring democracy or that you're having a hard time right now gearing up for meeting face to face, it's all right to step back. The words of our executive director, Mark Reynolds, say this: from the early days as an organization, we have one rule, and that is that we as citizen lobbyists meet with our members of Congress and come from a place of respect, gratitude, and appreciation for their public service. If that's not something you can do right now, Mark writes, it's okay to step back from lobbying. No one's expecting you to do that. There's other people that are happy to fill that role, and there's other ways that you can also build political will for climate solutions in your community. So we do want to make sure to acknowledge that and just name that that is one of the key decisions each of us makes in stepping forward with our relationships advancing with members of Congress. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it back to you, Solemi, to kick us into a first activity to get us started with storytelling.
Thank you, Brett. At Citizens Climate Lobby, we focus on what we want. And what we want is to solve the climate crisis. We want also a livable planet. In this exercise, we get down on the ground, exploring what you want to preserve. A quote by Evie White helps us frame this exercise. But before I read it, I want to open the chat. So if any of you can tell us who EBY is, if you know. And if you can read some of the answers on the chat, Brad?
There you go. We already got some real bookworms and literary geniuses. We've got Charlotte's Web. What else should he write? All the English majors out there know him from beyond his children book days. There we go. The Elements of Style.
Oh,
Legendary
wow.
editor at the New Yorker and style guide writer. Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
That's great. Well, to set this up, here is the quote of E.B. White, author of the Charlotte Web and Elements of Style, like someone said on the chat, gave an interview with the New York Times in 1969. Every morning, I wake up, turn up with a desire to save the world and an inclination to savor it. This makes it hard to plan the day. We in CCL might add, but if we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? In a way, the savoring must come first. Let me repeat the last part. If we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? Even though there may be some different opinions with who we talk about what is causing climate change or just how much humans are responsible for, we can all agree that there is something special on this earth that we want to be around for future generations. Having something we savor on this earth is the common ground we all share.
Obviously, all of us have a story and a place that we savor and connect in the world. And so this exercise that we're going to be prompting, and jumping into breakout rooms to start with, is just asking you to start thinking about a specific place that you love that is threatened or already negatively impacted by climate change. And to clarify here, we're not talking about a generic place like the beach or I love the mountains, nor do we want you to focus on a place that's meaningful to you that's threatened by other environmental factors like overdevelopment or toxic pollution. Those are really important issues to be aware of, but what we're specifically keying in on today is how climate change is and already will be impacting the places we care for. And if that location is in your hometown or your congressional district, all the better to help establish that common ground with your member of Congress. And the reason that we're asking this is that social science research is crystal clear. People connect much more strongly with their own backyards and that feeling of immediacy we have in our own communities here and now than concerns for further off feeling impacts, both in time or space. So start thinking about what your place looks like and describe it with your mind's eye imagery, descriptive imagery, help us understand what it is that you savor about it. And I'd love to also encourage, if you can, tie in the impact that your place is facing with local economies. Is it reduced worker or agricultural productivity, extreme heat or wildfires, inland flooding, disease vector expansion, or seafood yields? There's so many different ways that you can make your story personal and connected to common concerns for the natural world and economic well-being. And I'm actually going to pass it to Solemi here to role model this before we each have a moment to think about it. But we'll close just by saying this. Stories are ways that each of us, especially if we're prepared in that moment and the opportunity to present itself, can both break the spiral of silence, where we actually do acknowledge and talk about climate change and each of our personal connections to it, but it's also a way to humanize it. And rather than it feeling far off with icebergs or polar bears, how is it showing up in our lives? How can we humanize climate change and in turn deepen those around us for their own caretaking and preservation for places? So with that, I'll pass it to you, Solemi.
So let's consider what we love about life. Maybe family traditions or a special spot in nature, perhaps music, art, poetry, a certain way of life. Let's record what we love about life on Earth, describing it in great detail. Please have a pen and paper handy. But first, I would like to share something very specific about the place I love and how it's being impacted by climate change. I live in Florida. And I love the natural spaces, the biodiversity, the smell of seawater mixing with the fresh growing flowers along the streamways. I love alligators and the birds that live there, like this beautiful spoonbill. The Everglades ecosystem overall helps clean our waters. Here's the sad part. Everything in the Everglades is being threatened by climate change. There's saltwater intrusion, extreme weather is impacting the peat bog roots, so they aren't as resilient or growing as strong as they used to. All of these impacts Florida tourist economy, which means less jobs on top of all the natural world impacts. And with that, I pass it back to you, Brett.
Yeah, what I think we should do is just start a timer here. Olivia, if you're able to go to the next slide, let's just take out a pen and paper, or if you're more of a typer, given that you're on the computer right now, start typing in your own room, wherever you're at, your place. And I'll put the prompt here again in the chat as we start the countdown timer, and that'll help us be more prepared when we go to our breakout rooms. So just take a moment here and start describing your place that you want to be around for future generations and is threatened by our changing climate. All right, feel free to wrap up, and in about 5 seconds, Solemi's going to walk us through our breakout room activity.
All right, so now let's share with each other. Olivia's going to put us in breakout rooms. The youngest and the oldest will share what they love about life on Earth. When you get into the breakout room, go around the room and quickly announce your name and age. We don't care if you make up your age. Then the youngest person will jump first to share, and after 1 minute, the oldest person will step up to share. If time allows, let others in the room share. A Zoom pop-up message will ask you to come back to the main room. Decline the Zoom offer and enjoy those final 59 seconds. Zoom will bring you back to the main room once the countdown stops. People on the phone, unmute yourself by pressing *6. I know this sounds complicated, but we trust you to figure out. Olivia, are the breakout rooms ready?
Yes, they are. I'll start them right now.
All right, have
enjoy.
fun. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for sharing and welcome back. We went micro with that story, up close, with our own stories. Let's step back now, far back as an astronaut see things. Nearly 20 years ago, our founder, Marshall Saunders, heard an inspiring sermon at church about the astronaut Rusty Schinker. 13 years ago, Marshall included a part of that sermon in our very first climate advocate training. Brett, please read that to us.
I would be honored to, Solemi. Yeah, so this is the story of an Apollo astronaut during his mission in 1969. And as Solemi highlighted, astronaut Rusty Schweickart at that moment was let out of a capsule onto an umbilical cord. Usually, NASA keeps astronauts compulsively busy up there, but a peculiar thing happened to Schweickart. Just as he emerged from the capsule, something went wrong within the capsule. And for that moment in time, both Mission Control in Houston and the remaining astronauts had to concentrate on the problem, leaving Rusty all alone, cosmically suspended in silence in space. And during that time, Rusty had 2 profound conversion experiences. He looked back on Mother Earth and saw, in his own words, a shining gem against a totally black backdrop, and realized that everything that he cherished was on that small gem. His family and land, music and human history, with all of its folly or grandeur. He was so overcome that he wanted to hug and kiss that gem like a mother does her firstborn child. Compassion flowed through Rusty. Trained as a jet fighter pilot, he was that traditional hotshot macho man, but a breakthrough of something much bigger came washing over him at that moment silently in space. Schweikart's second awakening in space was a political one. He was a red, white, and blue American that believed that he'd always been taught the world was divided between the communists and the free world. Yet while floating around Mother Earth, he saw that rivers flowed indiscriminately between Russia and Europe. that ocean currents served all nations, communist, socialist, capitalist alike, that clouds did not stop at borders to test for political ideology, and that there are no nations. Nations exist in the mind of the human race alone. On returning to NASA, Schweikart was not debriefed by any spiritual director about his mystical experiences, and he even confessed to having wandered around in a state of stupor for 6 months, occasionally bumping into walls even, and asking himself repeatedly this one question: why did God do this to me? Through introspection, he concluded that God did this through Schweikart so that others might hear a message. What message? One grounded in compassion, interdependence, shared beauty on this shining, glistening planet. And this is Rusty's words again. This holy earth, we must take such care of it. It must take such care of us. This side of heaven, we are each of us so nearly all the other has. There is darkness all around us, yet between us there is just enough light to get by. And we aren't passengers on spaceship Earth, we're the crew. We're not residents on this planet, we're citizens. The difference in both cases is responsibility. And so with that, I will pass it back to you, Solemi, and ask you, how might we apply this framework to how we go about building political will for a livable world?
Many people are familiar with our vision to create political will for a livable world. If we said our goal is to create political will, then we should clarify just what that means. Think of political will as actions our chapters strategically take to demonstrate to Congress that the will of the people is to have a sustainable climate. So what does that look like? Political will is really just a clear demonstration of support back home. Legislators need to know a specifically actionable step. Not simply that we want a sustainable climate and a strong economy. They want to hear what policies we want enacted so that they can act on the will of the people. That's precisely what we'll get in just a moment. But first, a bit more on why we use the methodology we do. We organize people by congressional districts, which we have found to be most effective way to meet with and demonstrate political will to Congress. And through our decades of organizing, we have learned from many others about what creates political will and what does not. Here's why that's important. We know as volunteers, you are giving us something so precious, your time. And we know that you don't have an infinity supply of your time, and you could be doing many other things instead. So we only ask you to do. We only ask our CCL volunteers to do things that we know will have a very good chance of demonstrating the will of the people. We take actions that we know will be successful in having members of Congress move in the direction of our legislation. So what creates political will? We organize our actions into 5 levers, and we call them the levers of political will. Lobbying, we have media relationships, grassroots outreach, Grasstops outreach, chapter development. We'll review each in depth next. First, there's lobbying. Nothing is more impactful than citizens meeting frequently with the members of Congress and staff. So we meet with them often in order to build a relationship of trust and show them that this legislation is something their constituents want, and to educate them on how our proposal will impact their state or district. In a chapter, 4 or 5 volunteers aim to meet regularly with members of Congress and or their staff. These days, because the pandemic, lobby teams use video chat for this meeting. In between meetings, Like we talked earlier, a special volunteer called the CCL liaison checking frequently with congressional offices. These activities in other levels provide deliverables to demonstrate interest, concern, and desires from the district or state. To create political will through lobbying, you can ensure your member of Congress see the support you are building through periodic deliveries and through sharing in their social media. Continue finding and including trusted messages in your lobby teams, such as adding conservative to your meetings with Republicans, progressive leaders to your meeting with progressives, and so on. Build a team around each liaison to work strategically and use what you learn from the lobby meeting to plan the next step. Lobbying is the most highly leveraged activity we can do. Then we have media. We work with both print and digital media in order to drive the conversation toward the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Our local chapter media team coordinates work with local media, newspaper, TV, radio, and social media. They write letters to the editors, many do op-eds, CCL volunteers secure editorial page endorsements. When a newspaper that endorses a member of Congress also endorses the bill, it sends a powerful message that to the member of Congress, we got your back if you support this bill. Creating political will through media may include becoming the point person for those local newspapers to watch for opportunities for writing letters to the editors, an op-ed of your own, spread stories and coverage across social media, getting to know your editorial board and key reporters at your local or state newspapers. You could even use your connections with local community influencers, business leaders, and organizations to help them place an op-ed in support of carbon pricing. Prioritize leaders who will strategically be messengers that influence your members of Congress. And then with that, I pass it back to you, Brad.
Hey, thank you. Let's go through the rest of these levers as well. And then we should say we're going to do one other small group activity and take a break. We know that we're about halfway through here in 10 minutes. So let's focus on grassroots next. The third lever that Solemi highlighted here is focused on grassroots outreach. And that essentially means that we're recruiting and educating and engaging the public on climate solutions and on citizen advocacy and how to really participate within our own government. Now, opportunities within grassroots outreach look a little bit different during COVID, obviously, but prior to the pandemic, our volunteers would table, farmers markets, online events, you name it, are still going on, but you can essentially focus on generating phone calls and emails. You can even sign up and recruit other friends and community members to call your member of Congress on a monthly basis to send a personalized email via our web site and other opportunities as well. We know that right now, obviously, there's a lot of other creative ideas that chapters are using, especially with grassroots outreach online in the digital era for COVID. So feel free to share any of your examples in the chat that you are up to as well. But we'd also love to use this opportunity to just quickly speak about our action teams. And these are teams organized by CCL volunteers around a specific topic like ocean impacts or agriculture or higher education. And they're working to strategize on ways to move that particular sector towards supporting carbon fee and dividend-like policies. Now, most of our action teams are meeting monthly online, and I would say doing some of our most important work. And they're always looking for new volunteers like you to help make a difference. So especially if you're coming into CCL with a wealth of experience from a particular sector that you have a passion about, please check out these action teams in the link I just put in the chat. They'd love to hear from you. The fourth lever of political will is focused on Grasstops engagement. So if grassroots is the base of the community, helping kind of that grass field grow up, the Grasstops waving in the wind are the community leaders. These are the people, the decision makers in your community that have the ear of your member of Congress and elected officials to help influence and seek out their vote as a trusted messenger. So some examples of Grasstops action engagement could be anything from doing the research to decide who has the most impact with your member of Congress, to developing that relationship with them, educating them, and determining with them an action that they feel comfortable in support of climate action and in supporting bills like the Energy Innovation Act, and even when appropriate, including them in lobby meetings. We have many wonderful stories of Grasstops leaders from faith backgrounds, from business backgrounds, from local elected mayors and city councils showing up and joining you in your meeting and help leveraging their voice for support for climate action. You could also work with your city or municipal government to pass a local climate resolution in support of a bill like carbon fee and dividend, and encourage those endorsers to champion their support in their own creative ways with Congress. A lot of wonderful opportunities that you're welcome again to share in the chat too. The last lever that we're focusing on is often overlooked, but equally critical, and that is of group development rather, and organizing. And I would make the argument that it allows us to do everything else more effectively, because if we have more engaged volunteers, that means that we can lobby more effectively. We can be more inclusive with who else we're voicing our opinion and focus as a group on. We can generate more media. We can do more outreach. And so some key ways that you can include your focus with your group, if you're passionate on group development, is contacting and re-energizing your group, welcoming CCLers into the fold, looking around your chapter and seeing, who isn't here joining us? How can you help diversify your local group membership to include more youth, more people of color, more conservatives, whatever it might be in your chapter to make your group more representative of the larger community. You can also use Zoom as a technology or any online meeting software to help organize co-working spaces, to join together, even right now in the pandemic, online, and accomplish your goals together. So with that, that's a great overview of our 5 levers, but it's also a lot of information. And so we're putting on this next slide a little interactive overview of how they all work together. And what I like to share is that imagine, instead of feeling like you have to do all of these as a volunteer to be effective, that you are instead sitting down to a restaurant, your favorite restaurant, wherever that might be. It's finally opening up again. It's safe to go out and dine. It might be another year in the future, but let's just go on this thought experiment with me. So there you are, sitting down, and you're presented a menu. Pick your favorite dish. You don't have to eat everything on the menu to be successful as a CCL volunteer. In fact, we hope you don't. We hope that you pick your favorite meal and really indulge in it. Enjoy having that as your focus, knowing that you can come back and focus on other areas as you gain familiarity, comfort, and confidence. But again, right now, just know that all of these levers are working together as a team, focusing chapter by chapter how to move your members of Congress forward. And with that, that's the general overview of the 5 levers. And Solemi is going to set us up for a short activity before we take a little movement break.
So let's go ahead and get a pen and paper, write your questions and answers. Here's how we answer this. I would like to share I would like you to share regarding your interest in CCL and climate change. Climate change is my #1 issue of concern, and I love the core values of CCL. I feel aligned and effective at CCL. For example, what are your interests? It could be healthy eating, my family, my kids, being in nature. What are your areas of expertise? And write down as you answer these questions in a pen, in a paper. What are your areas of expertise? Do you like to present? Do you like to network? Do you like community organizing? In which other groups do you belong to or hold membership in? I am part of the Waterkeeper Alliance, and I'm part of Sierra Club, Pachamama Alliance, and my local League of Women Voters here in Collier County. Where do you live? I live in Naples, Florida. How do you prefer to work? I love working in teams, especially with people like you, because it takes a village. Olivia, take 2 minutes, please, And please, everybody, put in your papers, write the questions and your answers.
And as people are reflecting on their own, whether you're typing this in your own little email or in a notepad and paper, just know that this all is going to go to your next conversation with your group leader to help you and them identify the areas of interest that you have to plug in most effectively. So that's the end goal as you reflect on these interests that Solemi is asking us. All right, we have one additional prompt that we'd also like to have people reflect on just for another minute or two here. And that is thinking about what are your areas of interest. Solemi, do you want to introduce this one too?
Sure, of course. So let's consider the items on this list. What do you like doing? What could you offer to do? Let's take another 2 minutes to write down these questions, and please keep those answers for after the workshop when you contact your group leaders to talk about your actions.
All right, so as we wrap up here, I know we've got just a couple of other seconds to close up, but Solemi's going to transition us to a break. Let me just highlight again in the chat that if you need help connecting to your group leader, that's who we're asking you after today's workshop to reach out to with the information that you wrote down on your paper with this inventory and your interests. Please reach out to Solemi and I. I'll put a link where you can find our contact information in the chat if you need help being connected to your local chapter leader. But we so appreciate your willingness to think through and really help build out your focus.
All right, so now we're gonna have a 5-minute movement break. When we face with a threat, the humans fight, flight, or freeze. With an existential threat like climate change or a pandemic, adrenaline's run through our bodies. We don't release that adrenaline in fight, flight, or freeze. So let's get up our chairs and check out all that adrenaline. Take 5 minutes to stretch, get some water, use the restroom, refresh your mind. We'll have the timer counting down playing here and start again after 5 minutes break.
All right, so feel free to slowly come back to us wherever you're at, and we'll keep on going, but you're welcome if you need to continue to take your break. That's great. We're going to jump into the second half of our workshop here, which is really grounded in explaining and exploring more about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, and then getting us set up for our lobby meetings. So let's jump right in. And that starts by just acknowledging this, and that is we get the kind of work that we're trying to do is not easy, right? We've already been committed to this for over a decade, but one of the advantages of organizing across multiple levels that we didn't really explore yet is that there may be times when you or your group experiences a lever that feels stuck. You know, for example, maybe you've met with your member of Congress several times and they agree that the Energy Innovation Act is even the best proposal. However, they're not willing to support it publicly until they feel like there's support from primary voters or from businesses in the district. Well, in that example, then you've got a specific methodology to demonstrate that support that the member of Congress is asking for to ramp up outreach, to focus on businesses and community leaders with the Grasstops lever, and to also grow your group to broaden your local vocal base of support with your group development lever. And as this isn't easy, we also want to just name this. Citizens who are passionate, who are well-trained, who are organized by congressional district and have that good system of support, we can more than influence the process. We're committed to building positive, ongoing relationships with our community and with our members of Congress in order to create that political space that allows these members to move forward in the direction that we need them to. And so when we talk about building relationships, one powerful example that I'd love to just highlight briefly about how we build a relationship actually comes from a recent report that the American Academy of Arts and Sciences has put forward. So I put a link to it in the chat if you want to read the whole report afterwards. But specifically what this section is it comes from the US Commission's On the Practice of Democratic Citizenship's conclusion section. And here's what they say. The opportunity to participate fully in our constitutional democracy is, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., the chance to complete ourselves. Our best hope for human fulfillment lies in supporting and nurturing the political system that has been bequeathed to us, our constitutional democracy. So, to develop these accommodations with one another, We need functional institutions for joint decision-making. We can pick up this piece of work together right now, but at the same time, we must also rekindle that spirit of mutual responsibility in civic life, a humility that grounds and rehumanizes each of us. Our institutions and our norms will thrive only if we remember that democracy, when it works, is not a battle whose purpose is annihilation of the enemy. It is, if it works, a game of infinite repeat play that includes ever more participants. We must therefore remember how to work together, even with those we might want to demonize or ignore, if we are to achieve the reinvention called for here. And with that, we have absolutely no time to waste. Our constitutional democracy is only as strong and resilient as our belief in it. For love of freedom and equality, for love of country and one another, and for the focus out of hope for a better future, we need to reclaim our bond. If we turn back to one another, we can transform our institutions. We can renovate our Constitution and elevate our culture, and at last achieve a true democracy. And what I would invite us all to reflect on is that this bridge building that the report calls us into is at very much the heart of CCL's methodology. And if you'll go to the next slide, we can see that 8 years ago, people told us there was no way that you could get Republicans to sponsor a resolution in Congress that said that climate change was real, significantly influenced by humans, and that Congress should do something about it. But we chose as CCL volunteers to see that as a possibility and worked with Representative Gibson to introduce the Republican climate resolution. 6 years ago, people said there was no way we could get Republicans to sit down together, much less form and join a caucus with the word climate in its title. But instead, we chose to see that as a real possibility and worked with Representatives Deutsch and Curbelo to create the Climate Solutions Caucus, which at the end of 2018 had 90 members, 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats working together to talk solutions and address one of the most pressing issues of our time. You know, and even 3 or 4 years ago, people said it was impossible to believe that Republicans and Democrats would be willing to co-sponsor and introduce significant bipartisan carbon pricing legislation together, as it hadn't happened in over a decade. CCL volunteers again chose to see that as a real possibility, and today the monumental Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is a direct result of that decade of hard scrabble organizing that many of you on the call and others have helped lead to. So with that, we in the first half have explored our values, and we've talked about our 5 levers of political will, how we're using them across chapters, and how you can plug in. You might be asking, how? How now can we inspire Congress to lead? Taking what we've reviewed, how can we get people to join in helping Congress find its way forward on this and have those conversations? Well, with that, we're just going to practice an art that we call reflective listening as we prepare for our meetings. And so, Solemi, I'm going to pass it to you to start grounding us with a poem.
Thank you, Brad. I have a poem by John Fox who teach poetry for healing, like music or art therapy. I love what he says about relationship. When someone deeply listens to you, it's like holding a dented cup you have had since childhood and watching it filled up cold, fresh water. When it balances on the top of the brim, you're understood. When it overflows and touches your skin, you are loved. When someone deeply listens to you, the room where you stay starts a new life, and the place where you wrote your first poem begins to glow in your mind's eye. It's like it is as if gold has been discovered. When someone deeply listens to you, your bare feet are on the earth, and a beloved land that seems distant is now at home within you. And I pass it back to you, Brad.
That's a perfect poem to really ground us and really think about, at least for me, reminding us that when somebody feels heard, they feel at home. They ease up, they open up, and that's the place where they see that other things that might seem far away or they were resistant to all of a sudden feel possible. And so people learning how to deeply listen have created a tool set that we use called reflective listening. or values-based conversations, or you may have heard of a concept called motivational interviewing. And the basic sequence runs something like this, and I'll put this in the chat as well. First, you find the other person right. You acknowledge where you already have that common ground. Then you reflect back and confirm in your conversation what you think that they said. And then you identify and confirm their values, find common ground with those values, and ask permission to express your thought related to those shared values that you've highlighted.
So before we move into the details on value-based listening, let's consider what it looks like when someone doesn't feel heard. When I think someone isn't hearing me, then I might repeat myself over and over, hoping repetition might help sink in. Sometimes I catch myself getting louder and louder, as if shouting will help you hear me. Or I get quiet and say nothing. After all, why should I try if you really don't want to hear me? I might turn on my cell phone or even walk away. If we want to have our turn to talk to someone ready to listen to us, we can start by deeply listening to them first.
So let's jump in and actually do this step by step here for a quick activity in today's meeting. Let's try taking ourselves through these deep listening steps. And what we're going to do is read out a question that you might hear when talking about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Like, what about underserved communities? Won't they be negatively impacted and they're already suffering from COVID? So in the chat, share ideas of how you might respond. And again, the reminder is with this first step, you want to find them right. We want to tell them that we appreciate the question. So again, here's the prompt in the chat. And for you, share some ideas on how with your reflective listening, you can find somebody right and respond to acknowledge their concern. You might say something like, thanks for bringing that up. Or I love that you care for others. Or great question, I'm glad you asked. Many options exist. We're practicing each of these 5 steps briefly. Feel free to share what might feel natural for you to share during that stage in the conversation. And the question again is, what about underserved communities? Won't they be negatively impacted by a climate policy if they're already suffering from COVID? So as people jump in and share those, that first example, again, finding someone right is, I love that you care for others. I'm so glad that you shared that. Thank you for bringing it up. Affirming them for their concern. Perfect. So Solemi, why don't you go to the next one as people are typing these in and learning and sharing with each other.
So wonderful. We have found them right. Let's reflect back and confirm what we think about what we heard they said. Let's ask about underserved communities already suffering from COVID and express worry that the Energy Innovation Act will harm those communities already suffering. Using your own words in the chat, tell them what you heard them say and ask them to confirm or correct you. You could say, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard you say, if I am hearing you correctly, it sounds like you think, have I got that right? Let's populate all those questions in the chat, how you might answer.
So now we're on step 2 here of identifying the concern and reflecting back to confirm what you think they said. What are some ways that you might naturally be able to do that? Stephen says, what a great question. What parts of the Energy Dividend Act do you believe will negatively affect those communities? This is great. Keep them coming. Anne writes, I'm so glad you raised this issue. This was a big concern for us when we designated the act. Again, that's going to the first step here. We're reflecting and confirming. This is a great way to kind of correct whether or not you're hearing them correctly with stage 2. So I'll just keep going just for the sake of time here as people are continuing to think how they might interact in that situation, and say for the step 3, we're naming and confirming. And again, thank you for playing along with us. Using the chat this time, name the value that you identify and confirm with them. Remembering, here's what they said. What about underserved communities? won't they be negatively impacted and they're already suffering from COVID? You might say something like, I'm hearing you express your commitment to economic justice. Is that right? Let's keep on seeing some of these ideas in the chat for you to name and confirm their concerns, to really highlight that common ground and that step-by-step process of identifying and confirming what they have as values. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard you say that the rising prices will negatively impact low-income communities. Great example, Bob. Excellent. Keep them coming. So let me feel free to go to the next one here.
So now that we have identified their values and confirmed those, our next step, we found common ground. Tell them that you share or respect their values. You might send something simple like this. I also care about economic justice. So chat time. Put your answers in the chat based on the value that you have identified with the member of Congress.
And thank you for being willing to think through and experiment with us on this one, to really just slow down and look at the reflective listening or the motivational interviewing process.
I like this one, Brett. That's a great point. Oh my God, that's a great point, that underserved communities are highly impacted by COVID-19.
All right, so let's go to the last one here, and we've got about 8 minutes, and then we'll actually start transitioning to the lobby meeting. So we've got a lot to fit into that. And that is asking for permission to proceed. So at this point, is it all right if I jump in and describe the last step, Solemi?
Yes.
All right, so in our final step, before we ask permission, we share our own thinking after we ask that permission, if that makes sense. So building on what Solemi just highlighted, you could say something like, I also value economic justice. I was pleased to discover that the co-sponsors actually addressed that issue with the mechanics of the bill. Is it all right to share how the bill creates economic justice? Back to the chat. Use your words to say and acknowledge asking permission to proceed. That's exactly kind of what we're practicing here with the 5 steps again. Thank you all for participating and thinking through how you can demonstrate this reflective listening. And what I'll do here, as we are continuing to think through how you naturally have a key phrase or way to ask for permission to proceed, I'm going to ask for your permission to proceed to stay on track. And we'll go to the next slide here and talk about, you might be thinking, great, now that we've talked about reflective listening, what about the actual bill and understanding that? Well, obviously with any webinar, we're not going to be able to handle all of the questions and all of the details that clearly are important to understand or get to with your understanding. But what we can do is provide a brief overview for the next 6-7 minutes. And then we're actually going to go into breakout rooms in just a little bit with your mock members of Congress, who are going to also play the role of a mentor, where you can ask them additional questions. And so to start with, I would love to highlight the existence of CCL's laser talks. They're wonderful, what I like to think of as bite-sized advocacy resources that exist to specifically give information on how we practice communicating on key topics with other people in our lives. They're all footnoted, and by taking the time once a month with each of these topics to put them into practice, as CCL volunteers, we become more comfortable and conversant. On the next slide, what I've done is actually highlighted the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act laser talk. And so with that, what I'm going to do is read out loud what stands out to me. These talks aren't meant to be memorized. They're meant to be internalized so that you can feel comfortable and conversant in talking about the issues in your own way with your own words. So I'm going to read this out loud, and then I'll actually pass it to Solemi to start diving into some of the details behind the bill. But here we go. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is the first bipartisan carbon pricing bill introduced in Congress in a decade, and it's based on a plan developed by CCL to account for the costs of burning fossil fuels. If enacted, this act is going to help us drive down America's carbon pollution and manage the threats we face with climate change through the means of American technology, innovation, and ingenuity. We know climate scientists and economists alike say that it represents one of those best first steps to reduce the impact of global warming, and that's because by providing a predictably increasing carbon price, we're going to help stimulate invention and investment in the new clean energy economy while also making sure that every American, and I, we all have the means to weather that transition and participate in putting solutions to work. So that's a great overview. And with that, I'll pass it to Solemi after highlighting that each of these laser talks across many areas are a great resource for you after today to learn more about the basics if you don't feel like you've gotten the information that you want to out of our training. Solemi?
All right, we have reached the final and most essential topic before we get to practice our lobby meetings. Let's discuss the policy details behind the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Citizens Climate Lobby has advocated for a carbon fee and dividend style policy for more than 10 years. In late 2018, Congress introduced the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act in both the House and the Senate, with both Republicans and Democrat sponsors. The first time ever a bicameral, bipartisan carbon price bill was introduced into Congress. When the 116th Congress started in January 2019, the House reintroduced the Energy Innovation Act and the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, HR 763. Citizens Climate Lobby advocate now for that specific bill, but now it needs to get reintroduced. So we don't have the bill number, but we do have the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act policy language for the bill. So let's go under the hood and find out a little bit more about this monumental act. Let's start with a quick review of where we are today. The price we consumer pays for fossil fuel is artificially low in history. Governments has seen economic growth linked with incentivizing the development of fossil fuel. Today, this is also due to several factors, including before the production, fossil fuel producers receive discounted leases on public land and offshore. During the production, fossil fuel producers receive subsidies, special tax breaks. And after the production, the price we pay for fossil fuel doesn't include those huge hiding costs. These hiding costs are known as externality by economists, and some of them include, in the military, the United States spent trillions protecting energy supplies lines all across the world. In the health aspect, the use of coal alone increased health costs from 300 to 500 billion a year. In the environment, of course, there are the climate costs associated with adapting and mitigating the effect of a changing climate system. And with that, I pass it back to you, Brett.
Thank you, Solemi. Building on what Solemi's just shared, if the market price for any product, not just fossil fuels, doesn't include its real costs, economists have another word for that. It's called a market failure. And global warming has been called by some as the greatest market failure in the history of capitalism. So economists say the best first step to correcting a market failure is to hold a product accountable for its costs. With fossil fuels, that means moving those hidden costs Solemi just discussed back onto the balance sheet of the producers. The idea then of putting a price on carbon is simple. We add to the cost of doing business in those resources because we need to reveal the hidden costs no one is currently taking responsibility for at present. Getting the price right means that we make the market tell the truth. It transforms the most powerful lever in our country, the economy, to move in the direction that we need it to. And that it also means ordinary people like you and I, consumers, taxpayers, small businesses, will all recover the market leverage we're supposed to have to determine whether and where we do something with our money. We know the solution. If the problem is that too many greenhouse gases are being put into the atmosphere, then the solution is to stop putting them there in the first place. Economists tell us that if you want to get rid of something, the fastest way to do so is to make it more expensive. They point to the example of cigarette smoking. By making carbon pollution more expensive or accountable for its costs, that's what we mean when we say pricing carbon. And getting people to break their habit or their addiction is not going to be any easy task, whatever the policy tools. But consider the success of tobacco taxes in cutting smoking in the face of real substance addiction. The National Cancer Institute and the World Health Organization concluded, with a substantial body of research accumulated over many decades from many countries, that significantly increasing the excise tax or the price of tobacco products was the single most consistently effective tool from reducing tobacco usage. They pointed to the fact that we used to have almost 50% of this country smoking, and now that number is in the low teens. So on a similar chart that we just saw with the reduction in smoking, let's look at the expected emission reductions from the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. The emission reduction goals in this policy are more ambitious than any bipartisan carbon pricing bill we've seen submitted to Congress. And this is a new day for the climate in our world to celebrate sound policy. It's a result of CCL volunteers' years of hard work and a clear signal to other countries that there are legislators in the US that want to see this happen and fast. This is a message of hope. So let's talk about how it works. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act can be thought of having three important elements. So let's explore each of these briefly. How it works. This policy puts a fee on fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. It starts low and grows over time, starting at around $15 per ton of CO2 and increasing $10 annually each year. This will drive down carbon pollution because energy companies, leading industries, and American consumers will all have the price signal to move towards cleaner, cheaper options. Now, the second leg of that stool then sees to it that 100% of the net revenue collected from this fee gets allocated equally back to households. That's the cash back part of the bill. The money collected from carbon fees is allocated in a trust fund and given back to equal shares to every American adult, half shares to children every month to see as they see fit, to spend as they see fit. Program administrative costs are paid from the fee collected, and within the first 5 years should be as low as 1.5% of the overall cost of administering of the overall funds collected. The government then does not keep any of that additional money from the fee. And our third leg of the stool puts a fee on goods coming from countries without a similar price on carbon. We call that a carbon border adjustment. To protect US manufacturers and jobs, imported goods will pay a border carbon adjustment, and goods exported from the US will receive a refund under this policy. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Solemi.
So this legislation is effective. This policy will reduce American emissions by at least 40% in 12 years. It will is supported by economists and scientists as simple, comprehensive, and effective. It's good for people. This policy will improve health and save life by reducing pollution that Americans breathe. Additionally, the carbon dividend will put money directly into people's pocket every month to spend as they see fit, helping low and middle income Americans. It's good for the economy. This policy would create 2.1 million additional jobs over the next 10 years, thanks to the economic growth in local communities across America. It's bipartisan. Republicans and Democrats are both on board, co-sponsored this bill together. The majority of Americans support Congress taking action on climate. Solving climate change is too urgent to get caught up in partisan politics. It's revenue neutral. The fee collected in carbon emissions will be allocated to all Americans to spend in any way they choose. The government will not keep any of the fees collected, so the size of the government will not grow. So let's take a look at the regulatory pause. Some people are alarmed when they hear about the regulatory pause. I was alarmed too when I heard this the first time. After doing my research, I see the wisdom of the regulatory pause. The bill authors identify a short list of current and future regulations that address greenhouse gas covered in the Energy Innovation Act. They temporarily stop those regulations, which prevent double jeopardy.
Well, thanks for sharing, Solemi. I'm curious specifically about vehicle mileage standards, efficiency standards for like the CAFE program. And what about the Clean Air Act?
But the CAFE standards and the Clean Air Act continue to be going in full force.
Well, then what regulations really fall under this pause?
The Clean Power Plan is currently tied up in court. The Clean Power Plan, if it were in action, will reduce emissions by 3% by 2050. In contrast, the Energy Innovation Act will reduce emissions by 90% in the same time. I am willing to pass the Clean Power Plan with its 3% reduction so we can get a 90% reduction from the Energy Innovation Act.
Okay, well, that all makes sense. But, another question is we might need regulations if something unforeseen derails the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act down the road.
After 5 years, the bill will check of this goal and see if it's meeting this goal. The fee will be automatically increased by $15, $10 that year if it's not meeting the goal. After 10 years, if we don't meet or exceed the goals, even with the higher increased rates, the bill required the EPA to regulate greenhouse gas emissions so that they can meet our climate goals. So it will increase $10 a year. If it doesn't meet the goal, it will be $15 and it will be assessed within 5 years. And if it doesn't meet those goals, EPA will have to regulate those guys. So let's do a recap. The Energy Innovation Act aligns with our values. First and foremost, it works and it reduced American emissions by 40% within 12 years. Economists and scientists find it simple, comprehensive, and effective. We also like the Energy Innovation Act because it's good for people. It improves health and save lives, reducing pollution that Americans breathe. People get cash back every month to spend as they need, helping low and middle income Americans. Most will spend that money on mainstream, which create job growth right here on American soil. We like this bill because it's good for the economy. These ideas emerge from bipartisan conversations in and out with Congress. This is a great time to promote that all that we have been talking about. It's available on CCL Community. The website is simple, community.citizensclimatelobby.org, and we will put it on the chat for you. And to find these materials, go to resources and training menu option, then follow the pathway to lobbying with Congress. We're also going to put another link on the chat. And even though no two meetings are the same, the basic outline follows a general form. So prior to the meeting, do your research on your member of Congress and district, learn what they're really proud of, what they like and what they have accomplished, learn what really annoys them so that you will not bring that up in the meeting. Research your local impacts of climate change, learn how carbon fee and dividend will impact their district or state, review previous meetings, and determine ahead of time who will be responsible for following up. Assign roles like leaders, timekeeper, note taker, asker, and leaver.
All right, so now we've talked about the before your meeting preparation. Let's talk about a couple of the main roles that every meeting has, especially as you are thinking about your own mock lobby meeting today. The first main role is that of the meeting leader. And an analogy that we find useful here is that of a conductor. The CCL team leader is there to manage the meeting, not to dominate it. They're not necessarily the one who talks the most, but they make sure that they're empowering everyone to share and participate, especially the constituents in the meeting. During the discussion, they're also the one that is comfortable with asking open-ended questions and following those lines of thought to make sure that the member of Congress or the staff has a full chance to express their concerns or input on that original line of questioning. So you stay focused on opportunities to affirm shared values and ask clarifying questions. The leader can choose also to be in charge of handling those transitions between different parts of the meeting. Outside of the meeting lead, there's many other important roles in your meetings. And so depending on the size of the lobby team, an individual can fill multiple roles. Feel free to put those in the chat. Everyone's encouraged to participate in the discussion, which of those roles, but keep in mind that the most powerful people in the meeting of particular constituents and the trusted messengers. Let's think about these as we walk through each of those additional roles. The appreciator is the one that makes sure to say thank you, member of Congress or staffer, for a specific thing that they've done. It doesn't have to be related to climate change. It could be something about their public service. But doesn't it make you feel nice when you first meet someone and they start off by affirming something that you are doing right? Doesn't that change the way that you listen? Then we have the time monitor. The time monitor makes sure to keep track of how much time the CCL volunteers and the member are talking in the meeting. And the goal is to have it be an even 50-50 split. They also tell you the number of open-ended questions your team asks to help deliver and augment the understanding of that actual dialogue. The note taker is the lobby team member who takes notes. And if possible, it's nice to have that be an experienced volunteer. That person should be able to follow the thread of the conversation and specifically capture what's said by the member of Congress or the staffer. And then ideally, they type up those notes on the same day and they submit them in a reporting form. Now, the asker is the lobby team member who presents CCL's main purpose and ask: to introduce a steadily rising fee on carbon emissions and return the net revenue to households. Now, if possible, that person has a strong grasp of the policy, its wider implications and ripple effects. In a traditional meeting, when we met in person, that was the person that left the one-page primary ask leave behind. Now online, they could screen share that, or they could also highlight it in the chat with some of the specific notes. The deliverer is the person that is responsible for bringing constituent correspondence or community leaders to the meeting. And with the pandemic, those might be verbally summarized or sent in advance or as part of the follow-up. So they demonstrate proof of support from the district. The follow-up person is the team member who makes sure to take note of what we've committed to for the follow-up next steps. And they're also the one that sends the thank you email or the thank you card if we're in person. The person doing the follow-up is not the liaison, and they can coordinate with the liaison soon after the meeting on those items. And the other all-critical role right now, especially in the online era, is tech support. The person that is most comfortable with the platform you're meeting on and helps coordinate the rehearsals ahead of time so that people know the security behind it, how to mute and unmute and start their video and make sure that they've got a good connection. That tech support role is critical. And a couple of other optional roles are also helpful depending on the number of people you have. The photographer is always great to have somebody designated to take a photo with permission and to share online afterwards to demonstrate your work. And the observer is somebody that might just be set aside to listen for outcomes and underlying needs. Somebody that is making sure that they hear that if something is missing or they sound like there's a place that there needs to be more understanding, they ask about it and they find an opportunity to clarify what needs to be brought forth further to help the meeting move forward.
All right, so we meet in teams for 4 and 6 CCL members. Our basic meeting outline goes like this. Then you thank the member of Congress or the staffer for meeting with you. Timekeeper asks, how much time do we have for this meeting? Everybody introduce themselves briefly. If you're meeting with the staffer, then ask them to tell you a little bit more about themselves. Show appreciation for something that they have done that you sincerely appreciate. It doesn't have to be about climate change or the environment. Explain the purpose of your meetings to create the political will for a livable world. And briefly state our request. Support or introduce the legislation that put a fee on carbon-based fuels and return the net revenue to American households. Then mention that you have more to say on that, but first you would like to discuss their concerns.
Having done your research, you'll probably be able to anticipate what you think your members' key questions are to move them forward on support for this legislation, asking who they'd like to hear from more in the district to be convinced about the merits of our proposal to win their support, or what their preferred plan is to lower emissions. Really jumping into the nitty-gritty about the concerns they have about the policy, additional information or research they have, additional voices they'd like to hear from, clarifying, listening, using those open-ended question and affirmative motivational interviewing techniques we've discussed. All of that is critical for this area. And then after delivering our ask, we can think through supporting asks as a building block. Is there other additional legislation that is active on climate change that we think could move the member forward on support for larger climate policy packages and build support with them as a team? What are the additional ways that they'd like follow-up, clarifying what's the next step, who can we bring in next time, what should we be focusing on, clarifying and committing to those actions so that you as a team can make forward progress between then and the next time that they'd like to meet. And then thanking them for their time. And that's just really a general overview of how we conduct a lobby meeting. So let's talk about what we're actually be doing in our breakout rooms together. You're going to have a chance to talk first with your mentor, and then you'll have a chance to start making a plan as a team about your actual lobby meeting. And then we'll have a chance from there to jump into doing the mock meeting based on these roles, and then a chance to debrief. So with that, we're going to have a chance for each of these sections to be 9 minutes each. The instructions have been put in the actual chat. And if people have questions when they get to their breakout rooms, you're more than welcome. You can raise your hand and we'll be able to get people in there to help you out. But for now, you should be in a team of about 7 or 8 other people. And if Olivia is busy getting those breakout rooms set up, we should be all good to go. Welcome back, everyone. Hey, I am so thankful for everyone that is tuning in here. We're just going to mute all lines. And the biggest first thing that we wanted to start with is thanking your members. And thank you all, especially for our mentors, for making that breakout possible. We really appreciate your time and your help. And so a big round of applause for everyone on the phone or computer that were generously stepping into that role here on such short notice. What I'd like to do is just in the chat, put a reminder that after today, I know that we're ending in just a couple of minutes. If you have thoughts on anything as far as your experiences, feedback, questions, ongoing suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me or Solemi. My email's in the chat, and Solemi is going to put hers in the chat as well. But we'd love to hear in the chat any ongoing highlights of your breakout and practice time experience, anything that stood out to you in your preparations and mock lobby meeting. While we wrap up here for a final 2-minute review, please feel free to share one takeaway, even if it's a short phrase or something that you're going to be walking away from today with in the chat. And we can put any questions that you have as well in the chat. We'll try to get to those, but given that we only have 2 minutes, at this point, I'd suggest questions go directly to our emails, since we're not going to probably be able to catch up. So yes, we are going to have all of this available on CCL Community. All of the links that we've discussed, you're more than welcome to have after today. We will put a link where you can find the recording and the slides. And you also might be curious about what else is next. So at this point, we just want to highlight 2 things, one of which is the monthly calling campaign. So if you haven't heard of this yet, this is a wonderful tool that you can enlist even all of your friends and family in. It's a simple once-a-month reminder for them to call their member of Congress and step up to act on climate change. I've just put a short link in the chat. It's simply cclusa.org/MCC for monthly calling campaign. If you're looking for one thing that you can get anyone else in your network to leverage to have an impact, it's making a call and doing it on a consistent basis with their Congress member. And so thank you for your help on that. And with that, here is a slide link for you for moving ahead. But what we'd like to do is just emphasize that for each of you, the next step after today is if you have questions, you're more than welcome to email Solemi or I. And you're also more than welcome, please reach out to your group leader to get involved and engaged in what their next steps are for the actual lobby meeting planning that they're doing. So with that, we hope that you found today's training empowering and useful. And it's so great to see people's feedback in the chat. And I'm going to close it out by giving Solemi the chance to highlight this quote and close with any words of wisdom from her end.
So thank you everyone for spending your Sunday afternoon with us. It's such a great honor to see so many people here with us today, and that you took the time to be here with us. I cannot be thankful enough. So CCL is on the leading edge of engaging citizens participating in our government and enabling our members of Congress to work together across party lines. The only legislation that lasts is bipartisan, and CCL works to make better citizens a better government as we're moving toward solutions to solve our climate crisis. This is from our CCL volunteers. We are creating a movement of citizens climate lobbyists.
And with that, we thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to support you and your advocacy outside of today. It's been a long afternoon. You've spent 2.5 hours. Hopefully you feel to good purpose, and together we do look forward to creating the political will for a livable world. Stay safe, everyone, and we look forward to hearing how those meetings go. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.